I declared the everlasting truth of the Lord and the word of life for several hours, showing that the Lord was come to teach his people himself, and to bring them off from all the world's ways and teachers to Christ, the true teacher and the true way to God. From the 6th chapter of George Fox's Journal.
We are reading the first epistle of John. This is session number
7.
We left off at chapter 2, verse 27, and I think we may have done 28 as well. And now, little children, abide in him, so that when he is revealed, we may have confidence and not be put to shame before him at his coming. I think we talked about that last time, that this conjunction when isn't quite right, that actually the Greek word is the conjunction if with a conditional particle, if ever he is revealed, is the real sense. Although so many commentators want to change it to when, because that gives a very different kind of understanding. It's as if only in the future rather than if being at any time, now or future. And the word coming, I believe we talked about, that's parousia. Quite often translators will translate it as coming, but the real meaning of the word is presence. Just like the verb that's related to paremi means I am present. Apemi means I am absent, and apousia is absence. Part of the reason why it's translated that way as coming is because it could refer to the coming of the emperor to a specific town or city in the Roman Empire. And that is a possible meaning of the word, but the real basic meaning of the word is to be present or presence. And I think that's how Quakers have always understood it, even though they will use the word coming, because that's usually the translation you'll find in the King James Version as coming. Let's go on to verse 29. If you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who does right has been born of him. See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now. What we will be has not yet been revealed. What we do know is this: when he is revealed, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is. And all who have this hope in him purify themselves, just as he is pure. This word I just want to repeat again. This is a verb which basically means remain or stay. So often you'll see it translated here as abide or continue is also. And this occurs throughout this epistle, this verb meneo. The other verb that's coming up that has occurred and continues to occur is this verb phanerao. It basically means to make apparent, obvious, to manifest. And that's what we have in 28. And again, we have the same conjunction, this ean that we had just a few verses earlier. Ean, which is really a plus an, meaning if ever. And so often people want to translate it as whenever, which is a very different construction, which would be whenever. So if ever he is manifested, if ever he is made apparent to us, if ever he is made obvious to us, we should not be ashamed before him at his presence. And that's in 28. If you know that he is righteous, if he is the righteous one, you know that everyone doing or acting on righteousness has been born out of him, has been given birth to by him. I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. On is the previous verse. We haven't come to the next one. I was looking at the wrong verse here, but this will come up again. Then it says, see what sort of love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God. Indeed, we are. And because of this, the world doesn't know us because it didn't know him. And that know is the verb that can also mean experience It didn't experience him. We know that if he is manifested, we will be like him, if he becomes apparent to us, because we will see him as he is. And everyone having this hope in him purifies himself, makes himself holy, even as that one is holy. It's interesting that this word that means that, or that one, is used here several times to refer to Christ as that one. I'm not sure why. It's almost saying something like we can't say his name here. It may be too holy to say.
My Bible says, but we know that when Christ comes again, we will be like him. That doesn't sound to me like if he is manifest or when he is manifest.
I would not agree with that translation. This verb, the phanerao, this occurs several times. I don't even remember. I counted them once, maybe about 10, 11 times in this epistle. It's very frequent. It's like the feeling or experiencing that Spirit of Christ in a most obvious way, in a real, apparent way. Not thinking about it, not maybe having intimations, but in some greater way than that. Actually, it probably is good to go look at that word right now in the dictionary. Okay, this is what it says. Two general meanings. First is to cause to become visible, to reveal, to expose publicly, to reveal oneself, to be revealed, to appear. And the second general meaning is to cause to become known, to disclose, to show, to make known. So when he is made known, when he is disclosed, here in the passive voice, when he reveals himself.
That shows that they did not think that he had yet come, like the Friends translated it that way. When Christ comes again.
Well, if you use the word when, but if you use the word if ever, I think the writer is saying, if ever, then you will know that you are like him if you remain in his spirit. Because again, you have this discussion about those who are opposed to the true meaning of Christ, to the true spirit of Christ, to Jesus as the Christ.
But the words comes again.
We shouldn't use the word come. That's the problem here. The word that come is not occurring in this particular context or in the earlier one. It's being present or not, and it's being obvious or not.
And again doesn't appear?
What's that?
The word come doesn't appear, and the word again doesn't appear either?
The word again does not appear here. How do I explain this? It's kind of difficult. How people are translating this depends on what they already believe that this whole section means. And so they translate it with some presuppositions about the meaning of these passages. And then, of course, if there's a long history of these where it's passed on from one commentator to another, it sounds or becomes, this must be the meaning of what's being here. The word come does occur here, but not what we're reading right now. And I just discovered something earlier that I know I had a discussion with Pat elsewhere, and we were talking about the word flesh, sarx, but what may be even more important there is the word come, the verb come, and the participle coming, as to what tense that is in, whether it has come or is coming, even as a participle, something that has come or something that is coming. One of the commentators I've just glanced at, Raymond Brown, in the Anchor Bible, he seems to think it's possible, which is good, I think, that in the second epistle and here in the first, the Antichrist may not only be heretical, these Antichrists, in how they understood the original coming of Christ in Jesus, but also the future coming, the parousia, the presence, that both might have been something that the people that have left this congregation and that the writer is complaining about, they might have been in both directions thinking something differently than what those in the congregation were thinking, in which the writer himself is trying to reinforce as true faith. I don't know if this is making much sense at the moment, but these are sort of very delicate details.
Just to make it as clear as possible for those of us who don't quite understand, we're talking about verse 2, and we're talking about saying, my translation says, when he is revealed. And it sounds like Nancy's translation instead says, when he comes again. And you're saying that the actual Greek doesn't have the word come, and it doesn't have the word again.
Right. This is the verb I just gave that means to be manifest, to show oneself, to reveal oneself. The root of this word, the P-H-A-N, is a root that kind of means like obvious or apparent. Okay, let me go get that for sure, because that's my understanding of that root. Okay, phanerothe. It's an adjective, and it means pertaining to being evident, so as to be readily known, visible, clear, plainly to be seen, open, plain, evident, known. Also, that which is exposed to general view or knowledge, in the open, public notice. So it's this kind of sense of being plainly seen, okay?
So Henry, would this be an instance, maybe a prime instance, where most people are not going to know Greek? Maybe a person might not be able to take a class like this, but we have to know what Christ tells us. And if we say, read the early friends, then we would know how they understood it and what Christ has told them. And perhaps in our own experience, he's already here. Our inability to read the text of the scriptures perfectly may not, well, we try, but maybe that's the answer.
Well, you look at the King James Version, and it isn't quite right either. But my understanding of how friends understood it is how I understand it from looking at the actual Greek, that they had the experience and they could then connect the experience with what they read in their Bible translation. Even though their Bible translation in some ways is better than what we have today, but it wasn't quite right either. But when you have that experience, you know you have that experience. And so you could say, yes, translations are difficult things.
That's the inward teaching.
Yes.
And his presence in us. So we can't assume that just because we read it or someone read it wrong, they'll never get it, because it's God who is our teacher. People read the Bible over and over and get all different ideas about what it says. But if we read it with the Holy Spirit understanding and trust and wait on him, we will learn what we need to know.
Yes. So this adjective is the same root as this verb, phanerao, and there's even an adverb, phaneros. Let me see what it says about this here. In plain view, phaneros, in sharp focus, visual focus, clearly, distinctly. I may as well put that one down too, just so you get a sense of what's being said here. So, okay, we've got the adverb phaneros, in plain view, clearly, distinctly. We have the adjective phaneros, plainly to be seen, evident, known. And then the verb above, phanerao, to make apparent, obvious, to manifest, to make distinct, to make plain, to make clear. When he himself makes himself clear to us, makes himself manifest. Maybe it's just because of my training in languages and linguistics that I don't take words at their face value like most people. I look at things with a little grain of salt, just not always sure what people think is being said. There is what's being said. And this verb, phanerao, occurs multiple times here. We'll see it again, and maybe I'll point it out again, because it's just unfortunate we don't have an exact English word to translate it, as well as the adjective and adverb here, but they're all related.
One more thing about the issue about the antichrists that was referred to in chapter 1 and then also again in John's second epistle. There's speculation about who he was referring to. And I think that speculation is the wrong approach. If we look at the text, it's telling us about what the right relationship with Christ is. He goes into a lot of detail after mentioning the Antichrist about what the right relationship is. And so we can infer that the Antichrist was not in this right relationship, but we can't infer exactly what they were or who they were, because it doesn't give us enough information. What information it gives us, though, is what is the right relationship.
I agree with that. That's important because just in the passage above, it's talking about the anointing that is within you, the anointed one, the Messiah, the Christos, the Christ. That's right. He's giving clearly the right way that you should be following. And if you're remaining in him, in that spirit, this is what you're understanding. Just a little bit I read of that little section in Raymond Brown. That's an 800-page work, so I wasn't going to read it all in the past week. He doesn't mention any specific sect or heresy like the Docetists. He's just saying that they're possibly not only opposed to their understanding of Christ as really a human being, but even becoming the presence of Christ. I did much beyond that. So it's both possibilities there, which is, I think, very good to understand.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that we are given a clear sense of what is right, but we aren't given a sense of what's wrong. There can be infinite ways of being wrong, but there's only the one way of being right, and that is receiving Christ. So in leaving it open about who these antichrists are, that's fine, because they could be many different ideologies and theologies, and there could have been many different kinds of antichrists. They could have had many different ideas about who Christ was, and all of them wrong. But John is giving us information about what's right.
Right, I agree. Okay.
And who we're supposed to be looking at. So if there were other things spoken of, it would tempt us to look at the wrong thing. And it's Christ who keeps us from these things, and we're to look at him.
It's almost as if it's not worth describing what the antichrists think. Don't give him any time.
Yes, yes. Again, getting to the verse 2 of chapter 3, again, the same thing that we had earlier, when he is revealed. What we do know is this: when he is revealed, it's not when, it's if ever he makes himself apparent. That's what it's saying. If ever he makes himself apparent, if ever Christ is showing himself to us in some deeper way, we will be like him. We will see him as he is.
One other thing there is that if ever is making it as though it's not a done deal. We don't know for sure. And that's more in keeping with the fact that it's Christ who decides to appear. If we say when he appears, then we are putting some kind of constraint on him, saying, oh yes, he will appear. We're sure of that. It's just a matter of time. We don't know when. So it's like presumptuous to say when. But if we say if ever he appear, then that is leaving it totally up to Christ whether he appears or not.
Unfortunately, all the modern commentaries I've seen are going to just translate this in that other way that Pat just mentioned. The second coming, or in terms of a future physical coming. You get all those other things, so just be aware of that. Of course, in verse 3, all those who have this hope in him purify themselves, just as he is pure. Let me look up a word here, agnost.
In chapter 3, verse 3, it says, and every one. Is that what it says? Not every man, but every one?
Verse what?
Verse 3.
It's, how do I put this? All right, I'll give the Greek here. What this means is the pas is every or all, and ha is the, and ekon is a participle means having. So it's everyone having, or all who have.
So
That's
the
what my
Greek says
translation-
every one, not every man.
But it's not one, but yes. Every man is correct because this is the masculine and it's the participle ekon here is masculine, but that would always include the female as well. When you say every man, just like every man, man always meant every human being.
So in the Greek, it was not specifically males.
No, of course. And even I'm saying in the King James Version, man most often had its original inclusive meaning.
But in modern times, that sometimes is lost.
Yeah, people demand that it have an exclusive meaning, only male. But actually, I know that's not the history of the word man in the past 1,000 years of English, because a word like this word, manhood, used to mean virility. It meant humanity in the English of the earlier Quakers, early Friends, 17th century English. Manhood meant humanity. I wanted to get to hagnos here. Do people have this translation pure, or do they have another translation for this word? I would actually prefer the other translation. Does everyone have pure?
What verse are we looking
3.
Mine says hallowed.
Okay, that's better in its original meaning. This word that gets translated hagnos is also the basic word meaning holy. I would translate it as holy here. And then the verb hagnizo is, okay, so hagnos is an adjective. Let me just check on this verb here. It's the verb, I think, to make holy or to become holy. Okay, to purify, to make acceptable, to purify, to dedicate oneself. But of course, we're talking about sin here. But the root is the root that means holy or pure. And of course, the other word for holy, the holy ones, are the saints. So often Paul is talking about the holy ones, the saints, in a specific house church, those who have been sanctified. Holy is related to the English word hallow, just the verb. Halloween is the evening before the holy ones, the saints, All Saints' Day, All Hallowed. So congregants, early Christians in these house churches, you were assumed you were holy and you were to stay holy. You were to remain in him. After you became a Christian, it was expected you would never sin again. That was that. I think we're being very technical tonight, but these are important things here.
The question that comes to my mind is sometimes in the Jewish tradition, people wash their hands ritually in order to purify themselves before entering the temple.
Right?
And it's not quite in the same understanding as what you just put there. So for me, this kind of translation makes the verse much more understandable than if I use the one that would refer to hand washing or some other thing that you do that makes you holy.
Liz is talking about outward purification. Obviously, what these Christians here are talking about is inward purification. That was the major leap with so many understandings, to go inward, to look at things from an interior perspective. That's what really matters, the change of the heart, not what's on the outside, it's what's inside that is essential. And that's what must be repented. That's where the change must occur. You can do everything you want. You can have all the rites and rituals outwardly, all the sacrifices. What really matters is what's going on inside, interiorly. The Friends were very clear in that deep understanding. I know when I give talks, and I know I'm going to be starting my sessions on spiritual topics, perhaps in a couple of weeks or maybe immediately after Thanksgiving, one of the first things I quite often talk about is this essential need to understand two dimensions of reality, an inward and interior dimension and an outward, exterior, physical, carnal, worldly. In the inward, that's where everything must take place. And that's where Friends understood the absolute crux of any change and any ability to access God takes place. Inward and outward are two extremely important words. They have changed their meaning a bit. In modern English, they more often have the sense of direction, going in a direction inward or going outward in terms of a movement. But in older English, they just had a sense of a location, stationary, something that's interior, something that's inside, something that's within, or something that's outside, something that's physical on the surface. I have found that seems like a pretty obvious distinction to make, but I find it very hard for people to really get into the depth of what that means and where the change must occur. It's still so much easier to stay on the outward, on the superficial, on the literal side of things, rather than going interiorly and looking at the allegorical, the spiritual, the pneumatic sense, as Origen used that word, the spiritual sense. So that's just crucial. It's very crucial. In verse 7, let no one deceive you. Everyone who does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. The righteous one, Jesus, is dikaios, the righteous one. I don't know if I mentioned here, William Penn somewhere wrote, basically, to be a Christian is to be Christ-like, to be like Christ. That's a very clear statement. And again, there's a verse here that is often used in Quaker writings that have come down to us in verse 8. The Son of God was revealed for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. And again, was revealed as the same verb, was manifested, became apparent, to destroy the works of the devil. Those who have been born of God do not sin, because God's seed remains in them. And I've talked about this word seed, haven't I? I think here. Sperma, the Greek word that means seed. It also means semen. And it gives us our English word sperm. And even the Latin word semen is the Latin word that means seed or sperm. I'm sorry, I don't think I've read all the way through this paragraph, have I?
No, you haven't read it yet.
No, okay, so let's just read it through. Start with verse 4. Everyone who commits sin is guilty of lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. You know that he was revealed to take away sins, and in him there is no sin. No one who abides in him sins. No one who sins has either seen him or known him. Little children, let no one deceive you. Everyone who does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. Everyone who commits sin is a child of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The Son of God was revealed for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. Those who have been born of God do not sin, because God's seed abides in them. They cannot sin because they have been born of God. The children of God and the children of the devil are revealed in this way, namely, all who do not do what is right are not from God, nor are those who do not love their brothers and sisters. For a Jew, of course, the law was everything. And to talk about lawlessness meant you weren't following the law of Moses. But here understood as the law of the Spirit of God, as early Christians used the sense of something. It wasn't the outward law, but actually the law written in the heart. I've probably mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. In this Greek word kardia, which is heart, quite frequently in the Bible, New Testament, it can refer to consciousness and conscience as we understand it in our modern culture. It was only in the 17th century that these two words, consciousness and conscience, began to be separated. The earlier word conscience meant both consciousness and conscience. And this is true in many languages even today. It depends on the context whether you're talking about consciousness, conscious of something, or conscience, having that sense of what is right and wrong. Oftentimes, if you see the word heart, what I often do will translate it as consciousness and conscience to see if I can get a clearer understanding of what's being said there in the Greek. And it often makes things a bit clearer. The heart is sort of our basic me. But this is just a little thing I do for myself to make a passage a little bit clearer. Again, in verse 5, was revealed or was manifested. It's the same verb, phanerao, made himself plain, that one. And you know that that one is made plain so that he might take away sins. Indeed, sin is not in him. Every one or every man remaining or abiding in him, continuing in that spirit, is not sinning or doesn't sin. And every man sinning has not seen him, nor has known him. And again, it's that verb that can also mean experience. They haven't experienced him. And then in verse 7, little children, don't let anyone deceive you. The one who acts on righteousness, acts righteously, is righteous, just as that one is righteous. Again, that one referring to Christ. The one doing sin, acting on sin, is of the devil, because that one, the devil, was from the beginning. The devil has been sinning since the beginning. And for this reason, the Son of God was revealed, was manifested, became apparent, in order that he might destroy the works of the devil. Everyone, again, the same pas, and then a participle, everyone who has been born, given birth to, out of God, by God, does not do sin, because his seed remains or abides in him. And he is not able to sin because he has been born out of God, by God, from God. In this, and then we get the adjective here, phaneros. In this, the children of God are manifest, are distinct, are in plain view. They are in plain view. The children of God and the children of the devil, so then, are in plain view. It's obvious, evident who's who. Everyone, each one, the game that pass, everyone, all, not practicing, not acting righteousness, doing, acting on righteousness. Okay, these are double negatives, is not of God, not loving his brother. Of course, brother, again, is inclusive of female, so it would be brothers and sisters. I'm just hoping that some of this is clear tonight. This wasn't an easy section to do, like last week also. And it really is good to look at what the original says here, because you really get, I think, a clearer idea of what's really being said. This might be a good place to end, because the next section we will begin looking at love, starting with verse 11. So menaos, again, that word that so often gets translated as abide. And here's this whole cluster of words that are all related in their meaning, the verb, the adjective, the adverb, and of course this on that occurs twice here in this epistle that really means if ever rather than hatan, which means whenever. Kainos is this pronoun that just means that, but it's so often here meaning that one, meaning Christ. Should capitalize that. Agnos is pure, holy, and as I said in English, the English word holy and hallow, and even the word Halloween are all related. The evening of the hallowed ones, all saints. Agnizo is to purify, that's the verb. Pascha echo means every one, and then that's just the definite article ha, everyone having, so each one having, every man having. And as I said in earlier English, manhood originally meant humanity, because man just meant a human. Greek sperma is the word that means a seed, and if it refers to a living animate being, it means semen. And the Latin word semen means seed and sperm. Idea is the basic word for heart, but so often it's good to look at this word in terms of a non-physical meaning of consciousness or conscience. And as I was saying, conscience in older English was the word that meant both consciousness and conscience. Okay. Any other questions, comments, corrections?
No, thank you, Henry.
I'm thinking more and more as we go through this epistle, it might just be good to go through the gospel according to John after we do these epistles. It will take quite a long time, I say that because I've been doing that with an adult ed on first days here in California. And we've gone through about, I've lost the count, 27 sessions, and we're on chapter 10.
Goodness.
But there's a lot to say there, obviously. Well, maybe I had more to say there because it's a mostly liberal friends group.
If the Lord spares me all that time, I'd like to.
How do they take what he's doing?
Those who are there, I think, are fairly positive. It's just a small handful of people, about, I don't know, Karen, Lee's there. How many is about 7?
Actually, I thought that
Eight.
last week it was over 10. I think it was actually, may have even been 13 last week, because I was trying to picture at one point what on earth it would have been like in the meeting house, because
Oh, this was yesterday.
it was definitely
Okay.
over 10.
Yeah.
Think of each of the people there. There was
There are people from elsewhere too, like from Sacramento and
Right.
from Ohio. 740 is there, and from Hawaii. So there are others who are interested in it. I'm kind of thinking that we've been doing this, that it may just be wise to go on and continue with the gospel after we finish the epistles. Does that sound okay to people?
It'll take a year at this pace.
That's what I'm saying.
Tom.
But I'm never in any rush. I'd rather get through something and have it clear and even be corrected if need be. And the gospel according to John is so important to friends understanding all the scriptures. Anyway, that's my thought right now. Ask me next week. I don't think I'll change, but you never know. So, okay, well, thanks everyone. And I will let you know if I do start the spiritual topics section before this month. It won't be this week, and I'm thinking it might not be next week, but that would mean only 1 week before Thanksgiving. And I don't think we would meet on the day the world calls Thanksgiving. So we'll see. Still doing a lot of thinking about that. Okay?
Everyone stay safe.
Yes. Okay.
Bye.
Bye all.
Night.
Good night.
This podcast has been a production of Ohio Yearly Meeting. It was hosted by Henry Jason and edited by Kim Palmer. The introduction and credits were read by Chip Thomas. The quote in our introduction is from the 6th chapter of George Fox's journal, Rufus Jones edition. A link to this work is available in the show notes to this episode. We welcome feedback on this or any of our podcast episodes. Contact us through our website, ohioyearlymeeting.org, or email us at oimconservative@gmail.com.